Expose Karine Jean-Pierre's shocking press conference.
Keeping you informed and engaged, now more than ever. This is Sekulow. We want to hear from you. Share and post your comments or call 1-800-684-3110. And now your host, Jordan Sekulow.
All right, welcome to Sekulow. We are taking your phone calls, 1-800-684-3110. That's 1-800-684-3110. You heard about the United States taking this abstention at the United Nations on a vote involving Israel. Now, I want to put this into context. 3 times before, the U.S. voted against this kind of resolution on Israel, calling for a ceasefire that doesn't condemn Hamas, nor does it require or even ask Hamas to turn and to give over the hostages that still remain, which is estimated around 100. Yep, some of those are alive. Some might be bodies, but it's still a very large number. And that was excluded from the language. So the U.S., the last 3 times, voted against this. And it didn't pass. But this time at the United Nations, the United States decided we'll go along with the language that doesn't include the hostages being released, that doesn't condemn Hamas and their acts of terrorism on October 7th that led to the conflict that is still ongoing. And by doing so, this resolution moves forward. Now, a resolution from the Security Council is a step in the wrong direction against Israel. But what we're most concerned about, and why we're watching it very carefully through our team, both at ACLJ Jerusalem, our international team, our NGO status at the UN, is that the United States making these moves politically over time, especially when it comes to the Biden administration and the left. And we can play for you because Karine Jean-Pierre was asked directly about it. It sounds like you're playing politics with this because you've now changed your policy, based on 18 to 29-year-olds who are protesting at their college campuses? Take a listen.
This is not about politics. It's not. The president does not lead his national security or things that are the right thing to do in this sense, right? Getting that hostage deal, making sure hostages come home, including, as I said, over and over again, American hostages, getting that humanitarian aid into Gaza and making sure that we believe that would lead to a ceasefire. That is not about politics. That is about the right thing to do.
Logan, the language doesn't include getting the hostages out, and it doesn't include Hamas. No condemnation of Hamas. All it does is say if they get humanitarian aid in, maybe then Hamas will do something good. And we've seen time over time they've gotten humanitarian aid in this entire time, and they sell it or steal it.
Yeah, we know where it's actually going. That's been the concern the entire time. And sure, I mean, maybe there's part of them going, you know what, we're not going to be able to get them to free the hostages, so whatever, throw in the towel. But it's sad when this is the place we got to in America, where you're able to say, okay, let's take out all the rough language. What was the rough language? Getting hostages out. You know, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, this is a clear move by the Biden administration. Looking at their poll numbers, which are not good in younger voters, where they typically, the left relies on. It's not just the college vote either, Logan, that we're talking about. We're talking, a lot of people say 18 to 29. I'd say it's more like 18 to 40, 18 to 39, really. And we've seen a shift in
I would even say,
the Christian community. We've seen a shift amongst, definitely on college campuses, getting more radical in support of, and anti-Israel, but in support of Palestinian causes, regardless of the brutality of the attack on October 7th. It didn't take long for everybody to just forget October 7th and just focus on the fact that Israel's response, as if they're just attacking Gaza for no reason.
For no reason. And I think you're right in that age demographic. I think it maybe even skews a little older, where you have people that are in college now, like I said, maybe up through adults. If you're on the left, essentially, you have to be. This is your talking point.
You become anti-Israel.
That's your part of your platform now.
Yeah, and so I want to take your calls. That 1-800-684-3110. The fact that this used to be an issue that united Republican and Democrats. And now there's only a handful of Democrats left in both the House and the Senate that stand with Israel. There are a handful, but they are dwindling.
We are going to be back. We would love to take some of your phone calls. I do have a couple lines open right now. So 1-800-684-3110.
NGOs, non-government organizations like the ECLJ, which is an accredited NGO at the United Nations, can go and deliver a message based on whatever the topic that they are addressing is. They normally have an agenda item. So one of the agenda items is Pakistan. And so in that oral intervention, we're bringing up the persecution of our own client in Pakistan. That's one that we'll play for you tomorrow. But Israel, an agenda item, as happens to be often at the UN Human Rights Council, because they love to hate Israel at the UN Human Rights Council, afforded us an opportunity to go there and speak on behalf of defense of Israel. And so this is Cece Heil in Geneva.
Israel faced one of the worst attacks by Hamas, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and other terrorist groups from the Gaza Strip. Over 1,200 Israelis were brutally killed, including men, women, children, infants, and the elderly. Women were raped and mutilated. Dead bodies were desecrated. The terrorists bragged about these atrocities. There's no doubt that Hamas's actions constituted crimes against humanity. This council must unequivocally condemn Hamas for its war crimes against Israel and affirm Israel's inherent right to self-defense.
Really powerful stuff that's happening all around the world thanks to your support. I mean, really, that's all it is thanks to your support. We wouldn't be able to afford the travel alone. And that cost alone, as you know, as someone who's probably traveled worldwide, you know that is not something to take lightly. So we have to be able to do these things. We have to be able to work all over the world. We have to have offices in Israel, in Washington, D.C. We have, satellite offices around the country and around the world. In Strasbourg, France, at the European Union. We are wherever we can be. We have a representation at the UN, whether you like it or like them or not. Someone's got to be there for your voice. And we are really blessed to be able to do that. I don't take that lightly at all.
Welcome back to Sekulow, overseas with the European Center for Law and Justice, as we are renewing our work there. Of course, continues on at the International Court of Human Rights and also at the European Parliament. And you've probably, if you follow kind of conservative politics in the U.S. and around the world, you've seen the rise of conservative politics all over Europe. So we're kind of, as we do with the U.S., preparing, like we have our team in D.C., we're preparing the team at the ECLJ and working together on working with these new governments that have kind of been an unknown to Europe for the last 3 or 4 decades, that share a lot of our views on issues of life, on issues of support for Israel, economic issues, democracy, voting, freedom of the press, freedom of speech. So again, it's kind of this whole new world. And what we are seeing then too with our team at the UN is this ability to reach and put pressure on these countries like Pakistan. And we've talked about the Shahzad case, in prison, on death row, and Cece Heil, who was in Geneva for us at the United Nations. So our team there was able to deliver an oral intervention at the Human Rights Council. These were on video. You haven't seen this one yet. This is a new one, and we wanted to play it for you just to show you. With the ACLJ team is all over the world, active for the persecuted, active for Israel, active for you here in the United States for those 12 pending cases before the U.S. Supreme Court, making sure you have the ability to vote for the candidate of your choice in that last Supreme Court victory. But again, I want you to watch this or listen, if you're listening to the show, about what we're able to do at the UN in calling out Pakistan in front of all the ambassadors.
Giving the floor to the European Center for Law and Justice.
Thank you, Mr. President. Given the treatment of minority women in Pakistan, their forced religious conversions, and forced marriages, the ECLJ would like to commend Pakistan for recently adopting a bill raising the marriageable age for Christian girls from 13 to 16. Although that is a good step, it is still insufficient to fully protect these young Christian girls. The law should be consistent with the international standard, that is, anyone under 18 should not be allowed to marry. Additionally, with the new administration, we hope that Pakistan will finally take a serious look at the blasphemy cases in the country. The ECLJ's affiliate currently represents 5 innocent Christians in such cases. Shahzad Masih and Amun Ayoub's cases have been brought before this council many times. We simply ask that the government establish mechanisms to sort out false accusations, stop prosecuting innocent people who face false allegations, and expedite cases that are pending. Amun Ayoub has spent over 10 years in prison. Shahzad Masih has spent over 6 years in prison. We stand ready to work with the authorities to address these issues and work together to fulfill our obligations for justice and the protection of human rights. And as the Pakistani representative said yesterday, justice delayed is justice denied, and we agree. Thank you.
And CC and our team have done a great job, Logan, because it's not only at the UN Human Rights Council. We have the UN group on the arbitrary detention, a number, I think it's 4 or 5 special rapporteurs just on the case involving Shahzad. I think we're very close there. Of course, until they're released and released safely and securely, you have to assume that their life is in danger. But that is what we're very close on. I want to remind people too, Pastor Saul, who we were working on for 7 years, he's been imprisoned in China for distributing Bibles. We began representing him 5 years ago when the family had kind of exhausted their domestic efforts, and ultimately the ACLJ sticking with it with our international team. He has been released. He has not yet been returned to the United States, and I don't know, we don't have any indication yet that he's got to the U.S. Embassy yet, so we want to be very careful in not providing too much information about where he is, but I do want to let you know that he is out of prison. And that's an example, Logan, of the kind of work that we do that isn't, over and done even within like one term of a president. I mean, it's 7 years in the making, but it's worth it when you're talking about a human life.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is the work that the ACLJ does, whether you hear about it or not. I think it's important to know that a lot of things are happening behind the scenes. I know it's easy to say that, but it's just true. And when we were able to reveal facts like this, when you have a Pastor Saul who you may have heard about 5 years ago, and then you may have thought, oh, they just stopped talking about it. Well, there's reasons things get, sometimes you have
quiet
to stop talking publicly because things are happening behind the scenes. And here's one of the proofs of that. He is free in the country, and we are doing what we can to get him back home to his family. But again, long term, these are 5, 6, 7 years, sometimes more in the making. And sadly, and even in American law, that is sort of the process here. Things don't work on a rapid, speed way. A lot of things happen just by sticking to it, going with the process, and winning and losing and winning again. Do you want to take some phone calls?
Absolutely.
Let's go to Joanne, who's calling in Ohio, watching on ACLJ.org, which we appreciate. You're on the air.
Hi, guys.
Hey.
Real quick, I remember your father saying after Trump won that those last 90 days were when Obama was going to do his worst. So this kind of goes along the same thing of what you were saying.
Yeah.
But that's not really why I called. I just want to acknowledge the passing of Joe Lieberman,
Sure.
a staunch supporter of Israel, spoke out against Hamas. I saw him a few days ago on Newsmax. I mean, this is such a tragedy. I mean, he's one of the few reasonable Democrats that were out there speaking truth, and I just think it needs to be acknowledged.
Yeah, absolutely. And, obviously we send our love and prayers to Joe Lieberman's family. Whether you agreed with them or disagreed with them on other topics, there were certain things, like a lot of old school Democrats, that we could agree with. And look, I would even know this is crazy. Until Chuck Schumer's weird turn against Netanyahu, Chuck Schumer was kind of one of those guys where you didn't agree with on almost anything, but was one of the leading voices in support of Israel when no one else was. Sadly, even he's been turned now. Right. Schumer in that situation going, once was the voice of, like, the one thing we could agree with him on was his pretty much unwavering Zionism.
Yes.
And now
that if he disagreed with Israel, it would be behind the scenes. He wouldn't take a speech, give a major speech calling for an Israeli president to be removed and other countries' duly elected leaders.
Again, someone just dealing with the sad society of where the Democratic Party is right now.
I have one friend I would say is Democrat, and Jared Moskowitz, a congressman from Florida, he's just kind of a thorn in the side of Republicans on some of the committees
a lot, which probably says a lot.
Yeah, he's kind of a funny guy, and he is funny, and again, I think he tries to lighten up some of the more heavy things on that Congress is taking on. But when it comes to Israel, he's got very strong support, and he's a young guy, so he's even in a minority within a minority of his party.
Yeah.
that he's got that support.
Yeah, let's go ahead and take this call because it kind of ties in. Elaine in New York on line 1. You're on the air. Watch it on YouTube.
Hi. I just wanted to ask why, if the world is so concerned about the Palestinian people, that nobody has offered to take the refugees, take the women, take the children, open the gates to Egypt, even if it's temporarily, just to get rid of the terrorists.
See, Elaine, I don't know if we could pull the picture that quickly. How secure the border is between Egypt and the Gaza Strip. I mean, it is, Logan, like, it is not even like our southern border. I mean, it's got the walls up, fences up, and literally every 2 seconds.
Yeah, we've been there.
You've got troop movers and like that are guns out, ready to go. If anybody tries to climb that fence, touch that fence.
It's a real border.
It's an armed border, with military, because they do not trust what a mass movement of migrants from those territories would do inside their own countries. The Jordanians tried it, and a king was killed. So guess what? They're not going to be a part of this. Yep. So that has been one of the issues, is that some of those countries have opened up before historically, and it's been to their detriment. Now, I will say the reason why internationally you get this support, Logan, is that look at the money in the Arab world. The Arab world has got money to throw around. Yeah, just like China's doing. Look, there's the Arab world.
Reason they did actually during the Abraham Accords and all that strive for peace, and it may not have been because they were agreeing with Israel all of a sudden politically. It's because the financial incentives were absurd. Because all of a sudden you had Israelis able to visit these countries, vacation. You could have a lot. And they could very close to each other.
They could visit their holy sites that were in Jerusalem. You could do business together. You could fly. I mean, again. There was that hope that, again, that the U.S. is kind of centered on internationally, which is that if you can economically work together and build things together, that you're not going to be enemies. Now, that hasn't necessarily played out in every country. China's a good example of that. But in the most part, the Biden administration just didn't even try to continue that. They just went right back to the same theory, which is no peace in the Middle East until the Palestinian question is solved. So we're going to force that back on all of these states, and they're going to all have to do the Palestinian thing. You've got the picture of the border? Yeah, check it out. That is what a secure border looks like. And that's the Egyptian border with Gaza Strip. Look at that, Logan.
Yeah, I mean, that's what you'd kind of somewhat hope we'd have a border.
Supermax prison.
Yeah, it's pretty intense looking.
Double fencing, tall. So, again, when they say, the Israelis, they're not doing anything to help humanitarily, look at Egypt. They're not, nobody's getting across that border if they don't want them to. Not even thinking about it.
The situation that unfolded at the UN Security Council. And this is where the United States took a new move there, and they kind of called back to the Obama playbook of allowing something to pass that damages Israel by just saying, we're here, but we're not going to vote. What's your readout on the abstention vote from the United States yesterday that allowed a ceasefire resolution to pass?
Silence is deemed consent. And the fact that the United States abstained as the UN handed this unbelievable victory to Hamas, to its Iranian backers, to those who wish death and destruction on Israel, on the Jews, on America, just tells you exactly what an evil turn this has taken. And I could tell you from the moment I arrived here in Israel, that's been the conversation, ranging from shock and dismay to fury and anger at this betrayal by the Biden administration of the Jewish people and the state of Israel.
Admiral Kirby said, because the final text does not have key language we view as essential, notably a condemnation of Hamas, we could not support it. So he's going out on television at a press conference saying we could not support it. But as you said, silence is consent in this manner. What's your response to Admiral Kirby?
This is a statement that evil wins, that it's okay to launch a massive, not just terror attack, but it's a war on an innocent nation against innocent men, women, and children, and that the world will back you because the U.S. is in the hands of a feckless administration. And now they're strengthening Hamas, which has always been the dominant force in Palestinian control and power. They're strengthening Hamas as the leadership, ensuring ensuring that if Hamas survives, which they're trying to keep, which America seems to be trying to keep happening, then they will be in control. This is nothing but other than an absolute disaster.
This response from the United States and the Biden administration, what I'm concerned about is that by the time we get to election, they're going to be not just abstaining on votes, but they're going to be like voting against Israel at the United Nations. So they've already gone from voting against these bad resolutions for Israel. So that was good. But they've moved from that to abstaining. And then the likely next move is that you are so upset by if Israel continues this, what I believe is justified war against Hamas until they deliver those hostages and cease their attacks on Israel, that eventually, if they don't do this resolution, are you going to actually go and vote yes to start actually condemning Israel? Are you going to join those countries at the United Nations? Is the U.S. going to join in that? I mean, it's the likely next step if this administration certainly gets another 4 years in the White House.
The reason you may be joining us right now on YouTube, a lot of you just joined. You may have seen the headline, Jordan, of our headline right now is exposed. KJP shocking press conference. I think we should restate what happened and what we can do about it.
Sure. So at this press conference, Karine Jean-Pierre said, it says after the UN Security Council vote, the U.S., of course, decided to abstain on a vote that called for a ceasefire in the war in Israel and Hamas. This was a ceasefire that did not require, it does not require any kind of release of hostages, nor does it condemn Hamas for their attacks on October 7th. The entire reason Israel is still engaged in this conflict, which, yes, is, of course, is endangering the lives of Palestinians in Gaza because of what happened October 7th. They have to respond as a sovereign nation, and they still haven't got all of their hostages back. If Hamas wanted most of this conflict to come to a close, they would get those 100 hostages, whether some are bodies and some are alive, to Israel, and guess what? Palestinian citizens would probably not be facing any more of these air raids, at least for a period of time, if Hamas also stopped firing at Israel. That's all they have to do. But they're unwilling to do that, and they've got the UN backing them, saying they can keep hostages, they can keep firing on Israel, but Israel's got to stop. And the U.S. has voted no on that resolution 3 times because of that. It makes no sense. This vote, they just abstained, which means it moved forward. So they're very close to making a vote that is actually anti-Israel at the United Nations, going a step further than the Obama-Biden administration. And they're right, especially I think if you give them another 4 years, and it's because of people like AOC. Even though there's only 5 or 6 of these members of Congress that are in Congress, Logan, elected, this is the base of the Democrat Party right now. They all are echoing her message. Take a listen to her last week on the House floor, bite one.
If you want to know what an unfolding genocide looks like, open your eyes. It looks like the forced famine of 1.1 million innocents. We must write our story in this moment of what it means and who we are as Americans. And our story must be not that we were good men who did nothing.
First of all, the genocide, or what she's trying to determine as a genocide, the 1 million people she's talking about are not all innocents. They decided to elect a terror group years ago. They've decided to allow that terror group to be part of their families. I mean, I think within families in the Gaza Strip, maybe there's connections within all of them to Hamas. They did that with doctors. They did that with the UN Refugee and Relief Agency, and it was like 1 out of every 10 employees was working for Hamas. One out of 90% of employees had a family member as part of Hamas. So she says 1.1 million innocents. These are all people who are celebrating what happened on October 7th. And Logan, you don't get to go into a sovereign country, rape, murder, and kill, take hostages, and expect a sovereign country like Israel not to respond, and that response to be pretty darn harsh.
And I want to say, there's a reason we're still actively working. I read all the comments, or as many as I can. They go by fast, with thousands of you watch. And there are some people like, well, I'm waiting to know, I'm voting for Trump. It's like, we have to be proactively working right now. Number one, of course, it's no guarantee President Trump wins. You got to keep going. Number two, the work can't stop because this is people's lives on the lines.
Oh, yeah. A lot of horrible things to Israel could happen between now and
January. At best case scenario. That's
best case scenario is the U.S. stays, maybe just abstains, but that means these resolutions are going to start moving forward. And Security Council resolutions aren't like General Assembly resolutions. At some point, you could have, you could envision they throw in peacekeepers. They've done it before. They did in Lebanon. And you know what those peacekeepers do? They help Hezbollah target Israelis.
Yeah, and you may not, and the U.S. may have a better point of view.
I did a whole thing in law in my LLM degree in Georgetown on how the peacekeepers between Israel and Hezbollah on the Lebanese border during one of their last conflicts were literally pointing out for Hezbollah the Israel locations so that Hezbollah could target and kill those Israeli troops.
Our executive producer Will brought up a good point, which is also, if Trump is to win, then you have a couple months there where it could be an all-out war from the United States on Israel, where they just pull out all the stops, where the Democrats pull out all the stops, knowing that the Trump administration is on the way. So it could actually get somewhat more dangerous for Israel for a short term.
But I just wanted people to know right now that we're still heavily involved in what's happening in Israel. I mean, you've heard from Jeff Balaban, who oversees our office in Jerusalem. You've known since the October 7th attacks what we've done for the hostages, if it's bringing them to Washington, if it's bringing them to Spain, throughout Europe, to bring attention to it. We have, the Speaker of the House is bringing attention to them. Some have been released. Some have lost their lives. 100 still remain. We do not know the status. We don't know if all 100 are alive, but we do know about 100 hostages still remain. And yet, at the Security Council at the United Nations, where the U.S. has a permanent seat, and also that means a veto, and they can veto anything. That means all it takes the U.S. to stop it. There's a resolution that was put forward by the U.S. to call for a ceasefire, but that ceasefire also mentioned that you have to return the hostages, both living and dead, and stop the attacks on Israel. And then Israel would stop the attacks on the Gaza Strip. And the U.S., that was voted down by 2 permanent members. It was China and Russia. So you'd think the U.S. would not accept their ceasefire resolution, which removed any language condemning Hamas, Logan. I mean, think about that. Not even condemning Hamas, not even condemning Hamas for what they did to people on October 7th. Leave out the rest of the war. Just what they did to children on October 7th and women and the elderly and the hostage taking. It's not there. You won't find it. They don't talk about hostages. And yet the U.S. veto it, so it didn't pass because they could have done a veto, and that means that would have killed the resolution. No, they abstained for the first time. After 3 times voting no, they abstained. And Logan, they say, Karine Jean-Pierre,
supposed to be a win for us.
Karine Jean-Pierre says it's not about politics, as we played in that soundbite. It's all about politics because the base of their party has been the younger voter or that kind of college campus liberal city voter. And that voter, in this last, I'd say, Logan, since October 7th, has become radicalized in support of the Palestinian movement with like blinders on their eyes to the violence that caused this conflict. Some people think champions are born, that it's a title that requires something only a handful can ever possess.
There are times in our lives that we are called, every one of us, to step up and serve a cause greater than ourselves.
Even when the loudest voices in the room say it's wrong, that it can't be done. It can be a difficult stand, but it's one any of us can make, including you.
You can be the change. You can make that difference.
You can be a champion. We cannot do what we do without you.
By becoming a monthly donor, you can become a champion of life.
A champion of liberty, a champion of freedom.
Please join us. Become an ACLJ champion today.
keeping you informed and engaged. Now more than ever. This is Sekulow. And now your host, Logan Sekulow.
Welcome back to Sekulow. I did tell you we would come back with some breaking news, Will, and we do have it. Look, there's a lot of scattered reporting right now happening. Again, this at least involves, at a minimum, what's going on in the Middle East. Whether Israel is directly involved or not, we don't know. It's not confirmed yet. But let's give a breakdown of what happened just moments ago.
So reports are coming out, and we're reading this from Reuters, from Fox, from many other sources in the region as well, that an airstrike launched at the Iranian consulate in Damascus, Syria today, on Monday, has killed Mohammad Reza Zahidi. He's a senior commander in Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps, and he is also was sanctioned starting in 2010 by the United States Treasury Department, and he was described as a player playing a key role in Iran's support for Hezbollah, so their proxy in Lebanon. U.S. Treasury said that he has acted as a liaison to Hezbollah and Syrian intelligence services and was reportedly charged with guaranteeing weapons shipments to Hezbollah from Iran. The reports are that this was an Israeli airstrike. They have been carrying out many airstrikes in Syria against Hezbollah and Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps targets, especially in the wake of October 7th, as they tried to keep the engagement level with Iran lower than they need so they don't have a two-front war. But also, Israeli military spokesperson told Reuters that we do not comment on reports in the foreign media.
Yeah.
So no confirmation or denial, as is standard practice by Israel when these things happen.
Yeah,
but the reports are saying that the consulate building itself in Damascus was leveled, and there are apparently 5 dead, one of them being this Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps senior leader.
Yeah, so that is the breaking news. As more unfolds, we will go back to it if necessary. If there's any updates, if you're joining us right now. That said, I know a lot of you are joining us right now. We saw a number spike here about the arrest made on Easter services. That actually happened on Saturday night at St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York City. We saw pro-Palestinian / pro-Hamas protesters disrupt a service. You can find those clips. We showed them earlier. But I wanted to make sure if you were joining us, that's what we were discussing. And they were arrested. And good. There were some brave cops out there doing their job. So I have to commend them for doing that. These weren't people going in, peacefully protesting on the sidewalk. These were people interrupting a Easter service in the city of New York, a city that has dealt with terror and dealt with a lot of crisis over the last handful of years. Look, some at their own doing and some by what they voted for. But sadly, that's just the case. So we want to make sure if you're just joining us right now, that is what that headline was about. Let's go ahead and take some phone calls. Let's go to Kathy, who's calling in Kentucky on line 2. And if you want to be on the broadcast, 1-800-684-3110. Got 3 lines open right now. 1-800-684-3110. Welcome, Kathy.
Hello. I have a comment. I am so glad that you all reported on Cece housework at the UN. And that you all sent her, because our country, which used to be represented by the words, the land of the free and the home of the brave, we are seeing our freedoms being questionable all over the place now. And we're no longer a land of the brave. We've given into, Jesus said you cannot serve 2 gods, both God and mammon. And our leaders have chosen mammon.
Yeah, I think that's, Kathy, and I'm only cutting you off because we only got a minute till break here. I think that you're exactly right. I think there are brave people within the ACLJ. There are brave people like you who call in. It may not be in our leadership right now. Look, there are some good people, obviously, on different sides here in terms of what goes in Washington, D.C. But at the top of the top, I think you're right. They're bowing down to what they feel like is what's going to win them an election, not even what they know is true. I honestly think that's why you have a rise in someone like a RFK Jr. You may not like him. You may not agree with him. But I think we can all kind of say, I think he believes what he says. And that's maybe oddly refreshing out of Washington, D.C. That you could support someone potentially you don't even agree with just because there's a breath of fresh air that what they're saying, at least you think they believe. That is a big problem here. It's been a big problem in Washington, D.C. for decades. I don't know how to solve that one, but thankfully we have organizations like the ACLJ, people like CC Heil, our amazing team here to fight for you. Go to aclj.org. We'll be right back with Dr. Harry Hutchinson in just a moment.
People people are saying, but Mr. President, I'm feeling, my buck isn't going as far. What do you say to those folks about the economy and what's going on?
Well, I say we have the best economy in the world. We got to make it better. We really do have the best economy in the world.
I don't think I've ever seen anything in my 38 years of being here of the economy affecting people the way it is right now.
Housing, groceries, gas, everything is really impacting people's budgets.
Voters tell us what they're paying at the gas pump will definitely influence how they will vote.
It is actually hurting my pockets. Spending that extra cash.
$60 for a full tank of gas right now is kind of crazy.
One driver who sold his SUV and now shares his compact car with his wife.
That was kind of like our way of kind of just adapting to what's going on right now with the economy and with the gas prices. Kind of made a sacrifice.
You notice the leading economists aren't making much fun of Bidenomics anymore. They're thinking maybe it works to build from the middle out and the bottom up.
65 to 70 pounds of food that these people are receiving, and it's all in response to these rising grocery costs.
A lot of people come to us that have never asked for help before, have never needed help before. There's a lot of people that are in absolute panic about how am I going to do this?
The president has indicated, and I certainly agree, that getting the cost of living down should be number one economic priority.
I think voters have decided the cure for inflation is not Biden.
What I want Americans to see is how successful the president's agenda, which is not just a short-term agenda, but a medium and longer-term agenda.
The problem is just getting worse. We're seeing more food pantries open, more people visiting the food pantries, than the food pantries needing more and more donations and more help.
Welcome back to Sekulow. As I said, phone lines are open, 1-800-684-3110. If you're on hold, stay on hold. We'll get to you coming up in the next segment. We are now joined by Senior Counsel and Director of Policy, the ACLJ, Harry Hutchinson, to discuss a pretty interesting turn of events. Will, you had President Biden. He was on the Today Show on Easter, or NBC, with Al Roker on Easter, discussing all of the, fun festivities and in that. But, you got to give it to Al Roker. He asked a question that maybe was going to make things a bit uncomfortable for President Biden, but no, they have this answer really prepped. Let's hear from first Al Roker. You know him, love him, followed by President Biden.
When people are saying, but Mr. President, I'm feeling, my buck isn't going as far. What do you say to those folks about the economy and what's going on?
Well, I say we have the best economy in the world. We got to make it better. We really do have the best economy in the world. Jobs are up more than they've ever been. We're in a situation where the lowest unemployment rate in 50 years is maintained.
So there you have it, the best economy in the world. We've got to make it better. We have the best economy in the world. Jobs are up. Everything is great. Don't, look behind the curtain. Everything is fine here. And I want to clarify, this actually was this morning. I was a little confused because of the Easter Bunny and all of the presents of the Easter things. They held the annual Easter egg roll today on Monday. So this was the Today Show that was there. I just wanted to clarify that in case you wanted to fact check me, Facebook. I want to make sure that you knew that I knew that. But how do you respond to that when you hear? Because it's definitely a prepared, semantical, if you will, if that's a word, argument to say this is the best economy in the world.
Well, it's certainly untrue. So, for instance,
okay.
So he talks about job growth being up. Well, let's focus on jobs for the moment. It's imperative to note that job growth is not up for American-born citizens. Job growth is actually up for foreign-born individuals, including illegals. So I think the president is somewhat confused. Number two, prices are up by 14% since Biden took office. And to some extent, that may understate the price increases that people are incurring at the moment, because the Bureau of Labor Statistics, when it calculates inflation, it focuses on rental prices, not home ownership data. And home ownership costs have gone up for some Americans by a factor of 80%. And so if you're looking at your own mortgage payments vis-a-vis what you might have paid in in 2019, the prices have gone through the roof. In addition, gasoline prices are up in part because the United States is supporting a war between Ukraine and Russia, and both countries are destroying energy reserves as part of their war effort. So that is sending gasoline prices up. So one of the things that most Americans should focus on, in my opinion, is that native-born employment is a whopping 5.5 million below its pre-pandemic trend. Now, I grant you that's a trend, right, but it's actually 121,000 less than before the pandemic. So many Americans are hurting, and most of the job growth, to finish the story, is in part-time employment.
So I want you to take that statement from Professor Hutchinson here and memorize it, because when you are at a dinner party or you have your family over, your more liberal friends who are going to regurgitate, oh, we have the best economy ever, and yada, 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 and all these facts, I want you to go back. We just provided you with an extensive reason why that is simply untrue.
Well, and it makes you wonder if the Democrats get away with this talking point, is their new MO going to be, let's just shut down the economy entirely, then we can get record job growth when we open it back up? Because that's kind of what he's implying here.
And you make an incredibly valid point, Will, because a lot of the so-called job growth is simply a recovery of jobs that were lost during the pandemic.
Right.
And so Biden wants to take credit for that. In addition, it's important to keep in mind that there has not been a growth in high-paying, full-time jobs paying full benefits. And so most people, even if they are newly employed, they are not feeling better about themselves, and justifiably so.
I think it's sort of the old school politics, which is blame the previous administration for anything that is going wrong, and then try to take credit for things that, really you don't have the credit you could take. So it feels pretty normal, weirdly, in politics for this to be the case. It is a ridiculous statement to feel that way. No one feels that way. No one feels like we're living in the best economy of all time. All of us have seen our bills go up. Everyone has seen all food prices go up. Again, you have decisions being made by families who probably never would have thought of, do I need to get this pizza delivered, or do I need to go pick it up? I mean, legitimately, those kind of decisions are having to be made, because you go, well, they're going to charge me this, and then there's going to be a service fee, and then, I'm going to have to spend $20 on a tip, and then all of a sudden, my $40 to feed my family tonight just went to $80, $85, and I'm sorry, it's no longer about convenience, it's about saving, as much money as you can when things are increasing and increasing, every day. It feels like the prices are going up. So to say the economy isn't the best place it's ever been, it's just moving around numbers.
Well, and to your point as well, California just started today, as we're on air, a new minimum wage for fast food workers.
Saw that.
It's $20 an hour to work in fast food.
These weren't supposed to be career jobs. I mean, maybe you're in management,
And right. But to that point, I still don't know that that's a livable wage, making $20 an hour working at a fast food restaurant. But yet, this is a reactionary type move because of how expensive, how debt-laden our economy is. And I don't know that the workers in California are necessarily going to be super thrilled about this move. Maybe they are because there's some reprieve. But the fact that they have to mandate at 20, which you can get into the whole discussion, Professor Harry Hutchison, about minimum wage law. But the fact of the matter that they felt compelled that it had to get to this point should be a better barometer of the economy than what the President of the United States is saying.
Precisely. So, number one, with the increase in minimum wages in California and in other states, I might add, this should lead to layoffs. But number two, fast food chains are going to face a double whammy because lower income individuals are already spending less at fast food chains. So fill in the names of McDonald's, Burger King, Five Guys. Their prices have gone up, and low-income individuals are actually spending less. So this should fuel job declines, at least in some of those industries going forward. And then there's a second hit that's out there, which is the roaring national debt, which has gone up very fast under Joe Biden. And at some point, the interest payable on that debt will go up. And what does that fuel? It fuels, arguably in the long term, more inflation and more pain for average Americans. So I think part of the problem with Joe Biden is a wealthy individual who is disconnected from the American people, from average working class and middle class Americans, and he keeps making these statements which make little sense.
Well, thanks so much, Dr. Hutchinson, for coming in here and really helping educate our listeners and me and Will and really understand the vast spin that can be taken when it comes to the way politics works. When you know the facts and when you see what they are, it's very clear. And look, again, like I said, go back and replay that. Listen to it. Take it in, because you're going to have to be able to defend yourself when you're having these discussions over the next 6 months or so as we head to a presidential election. What are we, 8 months out?
Less than 8 months at this point.
Less than 8 months?
November 5th is when we go to the polls.
Yeah, so it's going to come fast. And there's going to be a lot you're going to have to defend yourself of why you're choosing to either vote or not vote for the current president, for a third party, or for President Trump. Make sure you get those facts and listen to what we broadcast here. I also encourage you, we only got a minute left here till we head to our final segment of the day. I would love to have a full bank of calls and just spend the rest of the day hearing from you, because thousands of you are watching right now and there's 3 lines open. I want to hear from you right now. I want your point of view as someone who supports the work of the ACLJ, as obviously someone who listens to this broadcast, if you're listening on radio, or watches it on YouTube or Rumble every day. I want to hear from you. Now is the time to open up those lines on any of the discussions we had today, whether that was Israel, whether that is the economy. Do you feel like, I know a lot of you have been around longer than me who are listening right now, do you feel like we're living in the best economy of all time right now? Best economy in the world? Give me a call, 1-800-684-3110. I just want to spend the next segment hearing from you. Go to aclj.org to support the work of the ACLJ. Again, a special thank you to all of you that support us during that Life and Liberty Drive in the month of March. Broke records, and it's really amazing. I know we are so thankful to God and to you for doing that. We'll be right back with Your Voice. You can't even hire a punching bag anymore if you are on the left. You can't even hire someone on the other side to essentially say the things you know that will fire up your viewers, because that, just to have someone on the other side, that's just unacceptable. This comes from Chuck Todd, who, by the way, is one of the ones that pretends to not have that bias. Right. One of the ones who, meet the press, trying to be the straight newsman that's always, giving it to you, giving you the facts and not giving his opinions. Let's hear from Chuck Todd.
I think our bosses owe you an apology for putting you in this situation, because I don't know what to believe. She is now a paid contributor by NBC News. So I have no idea whether any answer she gave to you was because she didn't want to mess up her contract. She wants us to believe that she was speaking for the RNC when the RNC was paying for her. And look, there's a reason why there's a lot of journalists at NBC News uncomfortable with this, because many of our professional dealings with the RNC over the last 6 years have been met with gaslighting.
Ronna McDaniel, who, by the way, hasn't necessarily been the favorite of a lot of people for quite some time. But that's even just the concept of having a Republican to look at.
They couldn't apply that standard to every single person on NBC's staff, specifically Jen Psaki, who has a show on MSNBC called Inside with Jen Psaki. I don't know how many people watch it, but it's there if you want to check it out. But she was, right before that job, President Biden's White House spokesperson.
I've watched NBC and MSNBC for a couple of hours pretty much every week. I try to look and see what they're saying. They don't have dissenting voices on. To go on, even if you're a Republican that goes on, you have to hate Trump and you have to say that Joe Biden is the better choice. So there's no dissent. There's no debate.
Welcome back to Sekulow. We'll be taking your calls, by the way, and so stay on hold if you are on hold right now. We'll get to you a bit later in the show, or you can call in at 1-800-684-3110. We are joined by Jeff Balaban live from Israel. Will, and there has been some updates. We wanted to get some reaction from Jeff.
That's right. And Jeff, you and I had been talking yesterday as you were back en route to Israel about the situation that unfolded at the UN Security Council. And this is where the United States took a new move there, and they kind of called back to the Obama playbook of allowing something to pass that damages Israel by just saying, we're here, but we're not going to vote. What's your readout on the abstention vote from the United States yesterday that allowed a ceasefire resolution to pass the UN Security Council?
Well, you know what they say, silence is deemed consent. And the fact that the United States abstained as the UN handed this unbelievable victory to Hamas, to its Iranian backers, to those who wish death and destruction on Israel, on the Jews, on America, just tells you exactly what an evil turn this has taken. And I could tell you, from the moment I arrived here in Israel, that's been the conversation, ranging from shock and dismay to fury and anger at this betrayal by the Biden administration of the Jewish people and the state of Israel.
And I want to get your take on this, because this is, I'm going to read you what Admiral Kirby said as they try to spin that they were not supporting this measure because they abstained. And then I kind of want to push back on this, because that's what we do at the ACLJ. We point out the hypocrisy or the anti-Semitism or any other manner of anti-Israel action that goes on with this government. But Admiral Kirby said, because the final text does not have key language we view as essential, notably a condemnation of Hamas, we could not support it. So he's going out on television at a press conference saying we could not support it. But as you said, silence is consent in this manner. What's your response to Admiral Kirby?
We know that there have been other administrations, and not just Republican administrations. There were some spectacular administrations at the UN who had our ambassadors to the UN who represented America as a light to the nations, a light to the world, as opposed to just adding to the darkness, which is what's happened here, to turning our lights out. No, the truth is that this was a statement of pure evil. This is a statement that evil wins, that it's okay to launch a massive, not just terror attack, but it's a war on an innocent nation against innocent men, women, and children, and that the world will back you because the U.S. is in the hands of a feckless administration that, as we all know, because what I find fascinating is that the media reports this widely and nobody even seems to understand, no one contradicts it, understands the morality that's implied here, which is that everyone talks about the, quote, two-state solution, Michigan and Minnesota, because obviously the Democrats want to keep those two states, which are important swing states, which have heavy anti-Israel, anti-Semitic, Muslim communities and voters. Not to say that all Muslim communities and voters are anti-Semitic, but the ones in Michigan and Minnesota certainly are. And it's clear that for this domestic concern, they're throwing Israel under the bus. Let me tell you, America should not be following. America should be leading. They should be down there remonstrating against the evil of this idea of calling for a ceasefire, which is to say Hamas wins, terror wins. But, you know, it's completely consistent with what this administration has done since the beginning, which used this horrible attack on Jewish civilians, on Israeli innocents, to call for the creation of a Palestinian state. And now they're strengthening Hamas, which has always been the dominant force in Palestinian control and power. They're strengthening Hamas as the leadership, ensuring that if Hamas survives, which they're trying to keep, which America seems to be trying to keep happening, then they will be in control. This is nothing but other than an absolute disaster.
Jeff, I just was curious from a humanitarian point of view, even. I think we're seeing so much, and on the media when they're covering Israel, we're seeing Gaza, we're seeing destruction, we're seeing all the kind of chaos that surrounds it. What is the life during wartime in Israel? I just want to know, what's the feeling, the emotion on the streets at this point? We are months into this. It's not like, the days where every business is shut down and they're trying to figure out what to do. We're now 6 months into this. Plus, at this point, What does it feel like to be there? I've only been there during, obviously there's always times of struggle in Israel. There's always times of you got to always be safe and be aware, but you can not put your guard down, but it doesn't feel like an unsafe place to be just walking around. Obviously we know the anti-Israel sentiment that's happening even in our college campuses here. We had in Vanderbilt here, we had an issue yesterday. But what about there on the ground? Because we're not seeing regular Israeli life by any means being portrayed in the media.
It's a great question, Logan. And it's very difficult to answer unless someone's actually here, because on the one hand, everything has changed. Nothing is normal. There's not a family here that hasn't lost somebody close to them. There's not a family here or who hasn't had someone serve for months in horrific danger and therefore is agonizing every moment of the day about their father, their mother, their brother, their sister, their child, their parent. It's an ongoing trauma. The trauma of the hostages is an ongoing trauma. It's a very small nation. It's a nation that feels much more like a family. And so there is trauma, and yet life does go on. And part of the problem is that the people in this country have learned how to live with a certain level of violence and terror. And yet what's extraordinary is, and I wonder what will happen this year, every year after year, they do a poll internationally. I forget under whose auspices, of the happiest countries in the world. Israel is always in the top 10. Both the Jews and the Arabs here are always in the top 10 of happiness. And happiness is not related to your danger. It's not related to your physical comfort. Happiness is related, I believe, to being a sense of living a life that's connected to what you're supposed to be doing. And I think everyone who lives here recognizes that it's important. The Jews have come back to our homeland, and it's important to just to exist and forge ahead.
Well, thank you, Jeff. I appreciate you hopping on today, live from Israel, running our office in Israel, the ACLJ Jerusalem. We couldn't be more proud to have that set up there, and hopefully that expands and grows as the support continues from a lot of people here. You'll see the press, and you'll feel like everyone in America is now on one side of this issue. We all know that it's a very divided country, and sadly, this has become one of those topics that felt like it didn't used to be divided, but now you're seeing a coalition of folks that maybe you never thought would in support of Israel, and then, of course, those who are against it. We appreciate you, Jeff, for coming on. I did want to tell you as we head into the next segment, we are going to hear, Will, in the next segment from Cece Heil, who is currently supporting Israel at the UN.
And this morning, for us, because it's evening, obviously, in Geneva, she delivered an oral intervention in defense of Israel. So our team has the courage to go to Geneva in the hostile environment that is the United Nations and deliver a message, an oral intervention in defense of Israel. And you're going to hear that. And tomorrow we'll play a defense that she gave in an appeal, really, to the Human Rights Council.
That is going to do it for today's broadcast. Again, support the work of the ACLJ. It's my last call today for you to become an ACLJ. I'm going to say today, become an ACLJ champion. That is a monthly supporter. Will, did we have a number that we need to hit that stretch goal?
Yeah, we need... Give me 1 second.
1 second. We've got 25 seconds. You find us that number, Will. I know it's under 150 to hit that stretch goal. So under 150 people.
111.
111. That's what's a big move in the last few minutes here. 111. There's a lot more of you watching right now just on Rumble and just on YouTube. Become an ACLJ champion. That is a monthly supporter at any level that you feel comfortable with. Of course, you can cancel anytime. ACLJ.org. Talk to you tomorrow.